of the Heartland Author Podcast. I'm Aaron Apollo Camp. For today's episode, I had the honor of interviewing Emily Hughes Johnson, who finished writing the book Birds of Paradise after her mother, Marilyn Anne Hughes, who started writing the book, passed away after a lengthy battle with cancer. Birds of Paradise is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'm here with Emily Johnson, the author, I should say one of two authors of the book Birds of Paradise. Emily, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Hi, and thank you so much for having me today.
Okay, now, my first question is typical for an interview. Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
All right, well, I'm Emily Johnson, as you said, and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am in marketing and advertising by day, but have recently published my book, as you said, and it's just been a wild journey doing that. This book was actually co-written with my mom, who began writing it many, many years ago when she was first diagnosed with advanced stage cancer. And at the time, I thought it was really a way for her to escape from things, but would later find out that actually she was leaving the book as a gift. Shortly after she passed away, I found a letter from her asking if I would finish the book for her. So that's how this became a co-author project. And yeah, that's, I guess, my background. I went to UNC Chapel Hill and graduated with a degree in journalism. And have worked anywhere from sports marketing to nonprofit fundraising to I now own my own marketing and consulting business.
Now, without spoiling too much of your book, briefly describe what type of book Birds of Paradise is and what it's about.
It's really funny. It's hard to fit it into a single genre because it was never actually written with an audience in mind. But it follows the story of a young girl, Ariana Haywood, who's 17 when we first meet her, living in San Francisco in the 1960s. And she's your typical teenager. She loves Friday night football games and school dances and the wonder of if he or won't he, kiss me. And it follows her on a decade-long journey as she grows up to find her place in the world and face, things in life that bring her immeasurable sorrow, and learn that to get to certain places you have to go through all of these things to find life's greatest beauty. So it's a coming of age family saga that morphs with her as she gets older and ends into a romance. And it follows her kind of all over the world to her family home, her island. And so it's strange to try and describe it that way because there's so much that happens over that 10-decade period.
Now, you finished writing Birds of Paradise after your mother died after a lengthy battle with cancer, and I'm terribly sorry to hear about the loss of your mother. But how did you get yourself in the right mindset to be able to finish writing the book that your mother started writing?
Well, it wasn't very easy. I found the letter that she had left with a copy of the manuscript that nobody had ever read, and with the request that I finish the story for her, probably about 2 weeks after she passed away. So we had been through that whole get the business done, figure out the bank accounts, everything like that. Family had come, gone, the casseroles were kind of, eaten. And all of a sudden you're hit with this, oh my gosh, she's actually gone moment. So finding this at that moment actually turned out to be a bit of therapy for me. Through her words, I could hear her voice. I got to continue to have a conversation with her. A lot of this book, even though it's a work of fiction, really is my mom continuing to speak to me, try and teach me the lessons that she would want to teach me but never knew that she had a chance to. And that all kind of forms between the main character and her family and then the romance. And so at first it was kind of, it wasn't shocking to me, knowing who my mom was, that she did this. But trying to get into the mindset of being able to deal with this, there was a lot of tears. And then I just got to that point where I just knew I could do it. So I sat down and started writing. I got an outline for where I wanted to take the story. She left no notes whatsoever. And I think she did that on purpose because she wanted me to have the freedom to control the story. And then once I did that, it was really down to the technical writing. She's very descriptive and rich prose. I'm, being in marketing and advertising, the exact opposite. So I wanted to be very true to her writing style. So then it was a matter of going back and putting layer upon layer of description and doing the same level of research she did to get these places that the book takes place historically accurate in a time period that I never lived through. So it was, from a technical standpoint, it was difficult. From an emotional standpoint, it was exactly what I needed at the time.
Now I'm going to, before I go into the next question, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about my dad, who died a couple of years ago, much more suddenly than your mother did. He died a sudden cardiac death. My oh, he's gone moment was, well, when I found his dead body in the garage. And he never left a book for me to finish, because the only type of books he was interested in reading were instruction manuals on topics like wiring a house and stuff like that. But it's not easy to deal with the loss of a parent. In your case, your mom suffered through cancer for a very long time before dying.
She did. I mean, I was 13 when she was first diagnosed with advanced stage cancer, and they told her statistically this wasn't something you survive with for very long. So really kind of at that moment, as a 13-year-old girl, you're headed into a part of your life that you really need your mother. And, she just decided, I am not going to let this happen. I am not going to be a statistic. She did her research. She found doctors that looked at her as an individual and not a statistic. And, her goal was to be there when I walked down the aisle to get married. And as I said, I was 13 at the time, so that was a pretty tall order to give on her behalf. But she was there when I got married, and her two doctors that really helped focus her and went to the ends of the world for her, they were there at my wedding as well. And I was 30 when she passed away. So 17 years she went through setbacks and surgeries, but she just never gave up. She was stubborn, and she always swore that cancer was never going to beat her. And in the end, it actually wasn't the cancer, it was the years of cancer treatment that just weakened her to the point where she just couldn't fight anymore.
Now I'm going to go back to asking you a few questions about your book. Is Birds of Paradise self-published or traditionally published?
I published it with a hybrid publisher, so not one of the big 5 publishing houses, but I certainly had the professional help and kind of push behind it from a publisher that ironically is actually in the Raleigh area. But I never intended to publish it. I was in the right place at the right time.
Now, do you have a regular writing routine? And if so, what is your typical writing routine like?
No, I don't, actually. When I started writing this, I was pregnant, or almost going to be pregnant. So at that point, I kind of just sat down whenever I felt like sitting down, put on the music, and just let myself go for as long as I could go. It was finished much longer after I had my child. He was 6 when it was finally finished. So really my routine was completely dependent on his. And sometimes I'd sit down and be able to write a few pages. Other times I'd sit down when he finally went to preschool and I'd be able to write all day. It's the only constant was that there was coffee next to me and that I had music on.
Now, are you planning on writing more books in the future?
I'd really love to. I have an idea for a book that would actually be a spin-off of Bird of Paradise. But right now it lives solely in my head, and I can't seem to get it from there onto a piece of paper. But I'm trying.
That's often the hardest part of writing a book for some people, is getting an idea to paper.
Well, yeah, and that was one of the gifts of being able to finish my mom's book, because the idea was there. The characters were developed, except one of them. One of them hadn't been developed. I just had a name and an idea of who that character was supposed to be at some point. But I had kind of the foundation, and then I was able to, from that black and white line of where she stopped, able to take the story forward. And then in order to kind of make the whole story cohesive and the themes throughout it, I had to go back to parts she had written and add in things in here, there, and conversations and events that would then lead to the part that I had written. And I actually wrote the very end of the book before I started anything else, because I instantly knew where I wanted it to end. And I think deep in my heart, that's where my mom would have taken it as well.
Now, as you mentioned earlier in the interview, you graduated from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, with a degree in journalism and public communications with a focus in public relations, and I got that part from doing a little bit of research about you before our interview. How did your college education and choice of major help you as an author, if so?
I think it helps because it gave me the foundation for writing technique, even though journalism and public relations writing is very black and white. You want to say what you want to say and get there as quickly as possible versus adding in all of this description. It still gave me some sort of basis for writing, sentence structure, making sure that things made sense and that you supported this and this and this, whether it was with facts or description or events. But it was also very difficult because although I have always had a passion for creative writing, I took every single English course I possibly could in college. It's just not my style. So in some sense it helped, in other sense it made things more difficult.
Now, I read online about you that you used to work in the marketing department of the PGA Tour. Is that true?
It is true.
What is it like working for the PGA Tour?
It was pretty amazing. I started playing golf when I was 8 because my mom was sick of my dad going to play golf on family vacations, so she thought we could all do it. And I took to it. I loved it from the time I was 8. I played competitive golf all through my junior golf career. I played in high school. I played for the boys team in high school. And I was also really lucky that I was on the Nike All-American Junior team, which was a lot of fun. And it's just always been a passion of mine playing golf. It's been a place where, even though it's the most frustrating game in the world, it's also a place that I can kind of release stress. And so it was almost a natural fit for me. I had interned with the USGA during the US Open in my hometown. I'm from Pinehurst, North Carolina. I moved there when I was 13, shortly before my mom was diagnosed, actually. And so golf was just central. And so when I landed a job at the PGA Tour straight out of college, I couldn't have been happier. It was really neat.
Now, you mentioned Pinehurst. That is not an easy golf course. Pinehurst number 2.
No, it's not. I have had some good rounds. I've had some really bad rounds. I played in a qualifying tournament for the North-South Championship on number 2, and I was 2 under after 6 holes and never made another par or birdie. I got to the 18th hole and had one of the worst rounds I've ever had in a tournament. So if that tells you anything about what happened between number 6 and number 18. But you know, it's still a lot of fun.
Now, I do have one final question. If you're uncomfortable answering this question, I understand, but what is your golf handicap?
Well, oh goodness. Technically, I don't play enough anymore to actually carry a handicap. But when I was playing consistently, oh boy, it's been a long time since I've even considered that, but probably somewhere between a 6 and a 10, depending on how often I was practicing at any given time.
Well, that was my final question of this interview. So, Emily, I thank you for appearing on the Heartland Author Podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I enjoyed interviewing Emily, and I have a lot of interviews planned over the next couple of months for this podcast. For now, this is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at authoraac.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter at authoraac. You can also watch videos on the Heartland Author channel on YouTube. Copyright 2022, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of its audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.